Okay, getting right into it today, we're diving deep into resin restorations in dentistry. And wow, you've sent us a ton of dental school study guides.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field,
Yeah.
especially with all the innovation going on.
Are you prepping for some serious exams, or are you thinking about specializing in restorative dentistry?
Well, we'll be exploring the different types of composites and how they're used to the evolution of dentin bonding agents, making sure those restorations actually stay put.
Right.
We'll even touch upon some pretty cutting edge materials like ormosers
Or Mosers?
and silurane composites that kind of sound like something out of Star Trek, don't they?
They really do.
Yeah.
But let's start with the basics, I guess. What exactly a dental composite?
So think of it as a high-tech mix of materials that creates a durable and tooth-colored filling, right? You've got an organic resin matrix, kind of like the glue holding everything together, and then you've got inorganic filler particles. These give the composite its strength and other important properties.
So it's more than just one thing. It's like a carefully crafted recipe.
Right.
And looking at your notes, I see there are a ton of ways to classify these composites. It's almost overwhelming.
It can seem that way at first, but those classifications are actually really helpful. They allow dentists to choose the ideal composite for each situation,
Well, okay.
based on factors like the size of the filler particles, the curing method, even the location of the cavity.
So it's like having a toolbox full of different composites, each one designed for a specific purpose.
Yeah,
That makes sense because every tooth and every patient is different.
exactly. And that's why understanding the nuances of these classifications is so important.
So you can give the best care possible.
Yeah, in terms of both function and aesthetics.
Now let's talk about how these composites are actually used in real-world situations. I see we have some information on different classes of cavities.
Right. Dentists use something called the Black classification system to categorize cavities based on their location. Helps determine the best approach for treatment.
Okay, so how do composites fit into all of that?
Well, let's take class I cavities as an example. Those are the ones you find in the pits and fissures of your back teeth, the little grooves on the biting surfaces.
Yeah.
Composites are great for these because they can be used as preventative resin restorations, sealing those grooves before decay even starts.
Ah, so it's like a preemptive strike against cavities.
Right.
Smart. What about those cavities that have formed between the teeth? I think those are class 2, right?
You got it. Class 2 cavities are the ones on the surfaces where teeth touch each other.
Yeah.
They can be a little trickier to restore.
I bet.
And we have to be mindful of things like polymerization shrinkage, the composite slightly shrinking as it hardens.
Ah, that's something to watch out for. What about cavities on those front teeth? I know those can be especially tricky since, aesthetics are so important.
Absolutely. Class 3 cavities are the ones found between the front teeth. And Class 4 cavities involve the edges of those teeth. Composites are a great choice here because they blend in really well with the natural tooth color.
It's like dental camouflage.
Right.
I bet shade selection is crucial in those cases.
You're absolutely right. Matching the composite to the patient's natural tooth shade it's an art form in itself.
Wow.
You want the restoration to be virtually invisible.
I can see why that would take a lot of skill and attention to detail. But it's not just about filling cavities, is it?
No.
I see notes here about using composites for core buildups and even luting cements.
That's right. Composites are surprisingly versatile. For teeth that are extensively damaged, we can use composites to build up the core structure before placing a crown.
Okay.
And resin cements, basically composites made for bonding, are used to cement crowns, bridges, even those orthodontic brackets in place.
Wow, they really are multitaskers.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in terms of how composites are used. Now, I'm curious about those dentin bonding agents you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. I see we have a whole timeline here. Looks like a fascinating history.
It really is a fascinating story of innovation and improvement. We've gone through multiple generations of dentin bonding agents, from the early days of, relatively weak bonds to the modern era of strong and reliable adhesion.
So it's been a journey of progress.
Yeah.
What were those early dentin bonding agents like?
The first generation agents, they tried to chemically bond to the calcium in dentin.
Okay.
They had limited success because the bond strengths were pretty low.
So what changed with the second generation? How did things improve?
Well, the second generation focused on either the inorganic or organic components of dentin. They experimented with various chemicals, phosphates, amino acids. They were still searching for a stronger, more reliable bond.
So it sounds like there was a lot of trial and error in those early years.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing those experiments really paved the way for future breakthroughs, right?
Absolutely. The third generation started to address something called the smear layer,
Smear layer.
which is a layer of debris created during cavity preparation. They tried to either modify it or remove it without disrupting the delicate structures within the dentin.
So they were getting more sophisticated in their approach. But when did the real game changer happen?
That came with the fourth generation, which introduced the total etch concept. Both the enamel and dentin were etched simultaneously with phosphoric acid.
Interesting.
This created a much more reliable bonding surface.
So that's where the hybrid layer comes in. I keep seeing that term. What exactly is it?
It's a key concept in modern dentin bonding. Imagine the bonding agent kind of seeping into the microscopic spaces. Created by etching the dentin, it forms a strong interlocking bond, almost like a meshing of materials at a microscopic level.
So it's like creating a super strong connection between the tooth and the composite.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the bond strengths achieved with fourth-generation agents were significantly higher than previous generations. It was a major leap forward.
Okay, that makes sense. So what happened after the fourth generation? Did the innovation continue?
Absolutely. The fifth generation simplified things by combining the primer and adhesive into one bottle, though bond strengths were slightly lower.
Okay.
And then came the sixth generation, which aimed to streamline the process even further. Self-etching systems, eliminating the need for a separate etching step.
So less rinsing and drying, more efficiency. But was there a trade-off in terms of bond strength?
There was a slight trade-off, especially when it came to bonding to enamel, but the convenience factor was a major plus.
Right.
Then with the seventh generation, they took the all-in-one concept to the extreme, combining the etchant, primer, and the adhesive in a single bottle.
Wow, so no mixing, just apply and cure. That's pretty impressive.
It is, but it requires meticulous technique to achieve optimal bond strength.
Right.
Like with any new technology, there's a learning curve.
It sounds like dentin bonding has come a long way from those early days of low bond strength. But it's still kind of a delicate dance between chemistry and technique, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And the quest for that perfect dentin bonding agent, it continues. Each generation brings us closer to a stronger, more reliable bond,
Right.
but there's always room for improvement.
Well, now that we have a good understanding of how to create that crucial bond between the tooth and the composite, let's move on to the actual placement process.
All right, now we're getting into the artistry of restorative dentistry.
Okay.
It's where science meets skill.
I'm ready to see how it all comes together.
So before we dive into that step-by-step of placing a composite restoration, let's take a moment to understand the materials themselves.
Okay.
It's like knowing the ingredients before you start cooking, right?
Okay, I like that analogy. So we know that composites have a resin matrix and filler particles. But what exactly are those components?
Okay, so the resin matrix is what gives the composite its flowability before it hardens.
Okay.
It's typically made up of these monomers like bis-GMA or UDMA.
Ah, those ring a bell.
These are the building blocks of the material. Think of them as the glue that holds everything together.
Okay.
And the filler particles,
Yeah,
those are what give it strength and structure, right? Like the bricks in a building.
makes sense.
The type, the size, the amount of filler particles, it all plays a huge role in the composite's final properties.
Like what?
Strength, wear resistance, even how well it polishes to a shine.
So what kind of materials are typically used for filler particles?
You'll find things like quartz, silica, and different types of glass particles.
Okay.
They're chosen not just for their strength, but also their ability to mimic the optical properties of natural teeth.
Ah, so it's about making sure the restoration blends in seamlessly, not just being strong.
Right.
I'm noticing in the notes that the size of those filler particles can vary quite a bit.
Yes, and that's why we have all those different classifications, macrofilled, microfilled, nanofilled, It all comes down to the size of those particles. As a general rule, smaller particles means smoother finish, but potentially lower strength.
So it's all about choosing the right filler size for the job. But why even bother with different sizes? Why not just use the smallest particles for everything if they give the smoothest finish?
Because sometimes you need that extra strength. Think about a filling on a molar that's constantly grinding food, In those cases, you'd probably opt for larger filler particles, even if it means a slightly rougher finish.
Right.
But for a front tooth where aesthetics are, paramount, you might prioritize a smoother finish with smaller particles.
The takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all composite.
Right.
It's all about matching the material to the specific situation. It's like a dentist's version of Goldilocks, finding the one that's just right.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about how those fillers